It's time for Recipe of the Day. Beef tenderloin is an expensive cut, and so if you are making it, you want it to be perfect. This recipe does it all. It is dry brine so that it's nice and flavorful and a bit tenderized, and then it's smeared in butter so you get a little bit of extra richness because tenderloin is notoriously on the lean side. That butter also drips down along the roast while it's cooking and goes down into the bottom of your pan so you get drippings from this beef tenderloin recipe to make gravy with. You don't usually get a lot of drippings from a beef tenderloin, harder to make gravy. Then also, this roast is done low and slow first, so you get it really, really tender and juicy. Benefits from that being at a lower temperature for longer, and then it rests, and then at the end you do a sear at a really high temperature to get it nice and dark. You make a gravy from those drippings at the end, and it involves red wine and a little bit of horseradish, which just goes perfectly with that very flavorful, very tender, crisply browned on the outside beef tenderloin roast. So beef tenderloin is actually the larger cut of meat that you get filet mignon steaks from. So if you like filet mignon, you will probably like beef tenderloin. You can get the beef tenderloin roast already trimmed and ready to cook. It's a little bit more expensive and it's not always available. Quite often you get it sort of in this larger piece that you need to trim down. You're going to be cutting off 2 parts from it and removing a lot of the fat and silver skin. I'm going to try to explain that to you, but if you want to see pictures, and there's a video coming soon too, you're going to want to go to cookthestory.com and search for beef tenderloin, and that will help a lot. So the silver skin is that like thin silvery skin that's kind of along the outside of this cut of meat. You just get a little knife under it and then you're pulling it away. I find it easiest to grip it using some paper towel because it's a little slippery, and you're just pulling it away and sort of cutting a little bit under it, trying not to cut the meat until that's removed. As you're doing that, you can also get any fat that is exposed off of there. Then you're going to really be breaking the tenderloin into 3 parts. It is the head, sometimes called the wing, and the chain, and that main beef tenderloin, which is what we're going to roast. You can actually just like pull those pieces away pretty well. You're going to see what needs to come off so that you are left with one fairly evenly long piece of meat. Okay. Yeah. There's going to be like a line of fat and connective tissue running between them and the main tenderloin. So the chain piece can usually be removed without even a knife. It's just going to like pull off. And then the head, sometimes you need to do a few little slices to get it off of there. Now, the head is great to use in soups or stews, goulash, beef stroganoff, you can do that. The chain is also really great in braises, soups, beef stews. But I'm going to tell you what I do is I actually cut both of those, get all the fat or anything else off of them. So I just have the meat, cut them into bite-sized pieces. I sprinkle them with salt and put them in the fridge for an hour. And then I just fry them up at really hot temperature just for a moment till they're brown on the outside. And we get these delicious little filet mignon steak bites as like an appetizer, waiting for that beef to be ready either later or the next day. You know, it's like a little pre-taste of what's coming. Once you've trimmed all that fat and silver skin and those other pieces off, you're going to season this with salt, pepper, and garlic powder. Mix together 3 teaspoons of kosher salt, 2 teaspoons of black pepper, and 2 teaspoons of garlic powder, and sprinkle that all over the roast on all sides. Now, you're going to notice that one end of this tenderloin is narrower than the rest, and you really want it to be an even thickness throughout so that it cooks more evenly. So you're going to fold that narrow end over, and then you're going to tie the whole thing up with butcher's twine. Just do a bunch of little loops of butcher's twine around the roast and tie, and you're going to secure that bit that was too thin that you've doubled over. You're going to secure that in place, and the whole thing is being tied up nice and tightly so that it is more even all the way along. We tied it after seasoning it so that the seasoning gets into all the little places, even though we're tying it up after. Then that goes onto a rack on a pan into the fridge. Keep it in the fridge for at least 4 hours, but it could be there there overnight, like 24 hours. That's great. Okay. Then preheat your oven to 275 degrees Fahrenheit. And if you're going to want this roast to be medium or medium rare or rare, you're going to cook it directly from the fridge. You're not bringing this up to room temperature first. And that is because we want it in the oven for as long as possible. Low and slow is key. Longer in the oven means more time to break down anything that's there, get juicy, get delicious, right? And so if it's still cold, that is all going to happen without it cooking beyond the temperature that you want. You see what I mean? Now, if you want it medium well or well done, then you can leave it at room temperature for an hour before cooking it. And that's kind of like giving it a head start at getting to the temperature that you want. And it's going to help it cook more evenly because in this case, we do want the heat to really penetrate and cook to the middle, right? Okay. Before this tenderloin goes into the oven, you are smearing it all over with a 1/4 cup of unsalted butter. Now, I will say I know that some people love the tenderloin because it is so lean. And if that is you, you don't have to do this. You could just use a little bit of olive oil on the outside. It's going to be fine. But the reason for using the butter is it does add richness to an otherwise lean roast. But even more, the butter is going to sort of like drip down through and around the roast and then hit the pan on the bottom. And it's going to give you like beef flavored drippings, which you don't usually get from a beef tenderloin. You don't usually get enough drippings to make gravy with. But we're going to do that butter on the outside. And then we're also going to put some unsalted beef stock in the pan under the rack while the beef is roasting. And that's going to get flavored by anything that drops off the beef. It's going to go in there and concentrate and mix with those juices. I do like to do the stock underneath just so that those small amounts of juices that we do get coming out of the beef don't burn to the bottom of the pan. And then they're not very usable. If they're brown to the bottom of the pan, that's great. We can scrape those up. But if they're burned on there, they're bitter and they're not usable. So this is a way to make sure that we have those drippings able to be used. Okay, so you've got about 1/2 inch of beef stock in a pan with a rack over it, and then you have your seasoned, but you can't tell it's seasoned because the seasonings have kind of soaked in, but you've got your seasoned beef roast on top that you've smeared with butter probably, and then you're putting a probe thermometer right into the middle, and you're going to be able to gauge the temperature with that as it cooks, and then that is going into your 275-degree Fahrenheit oven until the roast is 20 degrees Fahrenheit below your desired doneness. So if the final temperature you want is rare 120, you're taking it out at 100 degrees Fahrenheit. If your final temperature is 130 for medium rare, you're taking it out at 110. Final temperature is 140 for medium, you're taking it out at 120. Final temperature of 150 for medium well, you're taking it out at 130. So at that point, you take it out and then you put it on a platter to rest for 30 minutes. At this point, the roast has kind of a gray color. Don't worry, it's supposed to look like that. We haven't browned it yet, okay? So transfer it to a platter and then you're going to pour any of those liquid drippings from the bottom of the pan into a measuring cup. And then you're going to add 1/2 cup of red wine to the pan. If you don't want to use red wine, you can use a 1/2 cup of unsalted beef stock with a tablespoon of balsamic vinegar added to it, okay? Then you are going to scrape up the bottom of the pan, get anything that is stuck on there with that red wine, and then you pour that into your drippings measuring cup using a spatula to really scrape everything and make sure you have it all. Now we want about 3 cups of gravy here. This roast was a 4 to 5 pound boneless beef tenderloin. I think they're always boneless, but I'm just saying that's going to serve 8 to 10 people, okay? And so we want quite a bit of gravy. You want 3 cups. So now you've got your drippings that you poured into the measuring cup and then you added that red wine to that. See how much liquid you have. You want 3 cups. If you don't have 3 cups, add more unsalted beef stock until you have 3 cups. Your beef tenderloin is still resting at this point, but I would now increase the oven to 475 degrees Fahrenheit or even 500 degrees if your oven goes that high. We want it nice and high. And then we'll finish making this gravy. So you're going to get out a saucepan and you're going to melt a 1/4 cup of butter in that saucepan. And then you're going to add 4 tablespoons of all-purpose flour, whisk that up to make a roux. And then you're going to slowly stir in that liquid, the red wine drippings and extra beef stock. Slowly stir that in while stirring continuously until it's all nice and smooth and added. Then bring that to a simmer over medium heat, stirring quite often. And then you're going to stir in a quarter teaspoon of horseradish, just prepared horseradish. I like the stuff that's sold in the refrigerated part of the grocery store. It's a little more potent, but whatever horseradish you have. And you're not really going to taste it in this gravy. It's the tiniest little bit, but it just does something. Suddenly it just tastes better and goes so much even better with the beef. It's really remarkable. So add in that quarter teaspoon of horseradish and then give it a stir, give it a taste, and you can add salt and pepper if you'd like, just however much you need. Then at this point, your beef is probably done resting. You're going to wipe out the pan that all those drippings and things were in, the original pan that the roast was roasting on. Wipe that out because we don't want anything to burn onto there. Put the rack back on there and then put your rested roast onto the rack, and that whole thing goes into your really hot oven just until it gets to the final temperature that you want. I listed those earlier, but rare is 120, medium rare 130, medium 140, medium well 150. So you're putting it in there just until it gets to that temperature, which is going to be about 10 to 12 minutes, just until it's nice and dark on the outside. Now, because it rested for a while, it might not actually hit that temperature exactly, but the 10 to 12 minutes is going to get it pretty close to there. You can cut into the middle and have a little peek and make sure it is the doneness that you want. If you wanted it darker on the outside than it got to, you can turn on the broiler and then it'll really darken on the top and outside, but keep your eye on it because you don't want it to burn. You just want it to get nice and dark. Then you take it out of the oven, and because it already rested, you can slice it immediately and serve it with your horseradish infused gravy. I will put the link to this recipe in the show notes for this podcast episode, or you can head to cookthestory.com/ROTD and get it there. Everything there is arranged by date, so it's helpful to know that today is December 8th of 2024. I am Christine Pittman from cookthestory.com, thecookful.com, the all-new chicken cookbook, and from this podcast, Recipe of the Day. I hope you have a great day. Let's get cooking.